randomly.
Uh,
Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is KidNate at BloodyElbow.com with a special treat for you. GSP has announced he has vacated the belt. That's right, UFC welterweight champion Georges St-Pierre has announced that he is giving up his title. He's walking away from the UFC. He's taking a leave of absence. He may or may not be back to the sport. And Zane Simon of Bloody Elbow steps up into the big leagues to join us for his first MMA tete-a-tete. Welcome, Zane.
Thanks. I'm a pretty poor consolation prize, I gotta say. GSP's stepping down, but you get me.
We've got Zane Simon. That's right. Our fans won't be losing a thing.
That one door closes, another door opens.
That's right. It is now the Zane Simon era of MMA. Zane, were you expecting this? Was this a shock? At what point did you realize this was actually happening?
I think I was pretty certain this was happening about a month before his title fight, when his managers and mentors and everyone around him was starting to say, "Hey, he's gonna retire once this fight is over."
You
And they
put
kept
that
saying,
together, huh?
yeah, they kept saying it, and they kept reaffirming it, and GSP kept not denying it. And then, Dana White flew off the handle and said, "Nobody told me he was retiring," and
Well, it seems like Dana, as of, say, yesterday morning, was saying, "Oh, I think GSP is opening a mall or something, signing
yeah,
some autographs." So at some point, originally it was announced, I believe, day before yesterday, maybe yesterday, that GSP was going to have a big announcement on Friday. Then Dana White came out and said, "It's no big deal. He's opening a mall or something. He's had this scheduled for a long time. It's nothing." Then suddenly it's no longer GSP at some mall. It's GSP and Dana White doing a UFC media call.
yeah,
So
that was pretty obviously a shit hit the fan moment. I mean, I just gotta wonder how many people were telling him this wasn't happening for him to think that. Like, there must have been somebody there saying, "No, no, he's not. No, he's not."
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, it's very hard to speculate what's inside someone else's mind, especially mine as frenetic as Sports Innovator of the Year for 2013, Dana White. I mean, he's busy cooking ideas for world conquest. They've got their world fucking domination game plan going on. They're thinking about Singapore. They're thinking about Australia. They're thinking about South Africa, Russia, this, that, the other. And we don't have a welterweight champion anymore. That had to have been a rug kind of pulled out from him moment.
I guess I just felt, to me, like I say, I've seen this for like a month and a half now. I've been saying,
But
okay,
I mean, that's the difference between you and me. I pay no attention to shit like that because it never comes true. I mean, people say stupid shit all the time, and I've just given up on it meaning anything. I took it as a sign that yeah, maybe GSP's getting tired, but
yeah, I mean, I think the writing was on the wall from his fights too, though. I mean,
yeah.
a Nick Diaz who really had nothing for him was still able to hang around and even get some sort of action going in the fourth round of a fight, and he's looked tired, and he's looked like he doesn't want to be out there anymore.
He
And so,
hasn't he hasn't fought a fight with passion, I would say, going back all the way to January 31st, 2009, when he crushed BJ Penn. That he tore his groin mid-fight at UFC 100 against Thiago Alves, and that was a heroic effort just to stall for the decision. But literally, since then, let's run it down. UFC 111, March 2010. He fought Dan Hardy to a decision. He had numerous submission opportunities. At one point, he made not a white belt error, but a blue belt error, and had an armbar on Dan Hardy and didn't have it locked up right, just based on wrist position and grip. Josh Koscheck, in December of 2010, he was content to jab into oblivion, smashed Koscheck's orbital bone with basically the first punch of the fight, and still didn't finish him, just was happy to peck away and take the 5-round decision. Against Jake Shields, UFC 129, April 2011, he was aiming for a big overhand right, took it, never got it, was trying to go for this big knockout punch a la Dan Henderson on Jake Shields, got poked in the eye, and even pissed away a round. The 5th round went to Jake Shields in a complete striking match, which has disappointed any fan who wanted to see a good grappling match between Shields and GSP. Against Carlos Condit, UFC 154, November 2012, he spent over a year out with ACL surgery, And so comes back against Condit, nearly gets knocked out in the third round, gets dropped, goes to a 5-round decision against Nick Diaz, like you were saying, coasts to a 5-round decision, was totally dominating every reason to win the fight. Against Hendricks, he was extremely lucky to get away with a split decision in a fight that I think you'd have to be blind to score for GSP. I really do not. I can sort of see the argument. Okay, yeah. We've been through this.
Yeah.
Some people say he won the first, third, and fifth. Whatever. He didn't win the fight. I mean,
yeah, he didn't win the fight. That's I have the same feeling of like points and damage on that. It was one of those things like I don't care that he didn't win. I don't care that he got the decision because I'm not really invested in that way, even though I probably should be. But I don't. But it, still seeing it, it was one of those things. It was like, okay, yeah, no, you're definitely not. If there'd been another round. Well, if Johnny Hendricks hadn't taken the 5th round off, I mean, who knows how many rounds Johnny Hendricks is willing to take off at the end of that fight? But
yeah, that was classic bad corner advice when his corner was like 5 more minutes and you're the world champion. That is not what you tell a fighter who's trying to take the belt, and I think that is going to have some inestimable harm on Johnny Hendricks' career. But let's run through our topics here. We want to talk about GSP's legacy. Why is he stepping away? And then we'll get into Lawler versus Hendricks for the title fight. And then does Hendricks have any chance of replacing GSP? Favorite GSP moment? What happens with all of GSP's commercials and sponsorships? And then is he coming back ever? So, first off, his legacy.
Yeah.
Where is he now? Is he the greatest of all time in the UFC history and MMA history? I mean, Anderson Silva was annoyed at that, but then he went out and lost to Chris Weidman. St-Pierre goes out on a win. Like it or not, officially it was a win, and he was competitive with Hendricks. He did not get whored. He didn't get punked. Maybe he took more damage. I mean, clearly he took more damage than Hendricks did, but he won the fight. I mean, is George St-Pierre the greatest there's ever been?
Well, I know there's a lot of people saying it. Personally, for me, he's not. I'm an Anderson Silva fan. I think what he did can't be replicated. The 16-fight unbeaten streak and starting in welterweight and winning one of the biggest welterweight titles at the time in Shudo, and then going and winning a middleweight title in the UFC, and then fighting at light heavyweight and being really successful up there. I just think it's too much. I think it's the raw kind of numbers and performance that nobody else can really replicate. And the whole strength of schedule thing, I get it, but I mean, I still think it takes. I think it's still too nitpicky of a way to try and make somebody the greatest ever and say, oh well, if you look, he fought this guy in this year when he had this record, and that's better than when Anderson Silva fought this guy. And it's like I don't really care about that. Visually, for me, it's Anderson Silva, but at the same time, this can only help his legacy, honestly. For GSP, going out on a win, even a controversial win, that's the way everybody dreams of going out.
Yeah, it really seemed like he tasted the heat of Johnny Hendricks, didn't want any more of that. He was already burnt to a crisp, burnout, fighting, dogged by injuries. I mean, before the ACL, he had torn, I believe, the MCL on his other knee. Just his body is worn and torn. He's 31 years old, 32 years old, but in reality, he's way older physically than most 32-year-olds. He has put his body through amounts of stress that most people will never imagine, cannot fathom the amount of stress and mileage that he has on this fight. And honestly, it seems to me he did everything he wanted to do in the sport, and he beat the guys he cared about beating. I mean, if you look at the way he destroyed Matt Serra in their rematch, the way he destroyed Matt Hughes in their second and third fight, the way he destroyed BJ Penn, even the way he destroyed and then toyed with Josh Koscheck, those were fights you got the feeling he cared about. Everything else, he was just fighting not to lose. And
yeah, I mean, I feel like the Condit that Condit fight to me, that was actually for me sort of his breaking point and his burnout point, to where I think he really was like, because I thought he really, like, the first round or two, he came out and he really tried to press that fight. He was trying to go strike for strike, get in there, and mix it up with Condit, and then he got cracked hard, and he had that Sarah flashback in his mind where, he looked at his NOS Energy sponsorship and
exactly, the Under Armour started to get itchy.
Yeah, and he thought, I'm not losing like this right now. I got to win this fight, and I can look at, and that was the point, I think, where he just looked at, after that, it just became survival. The next fight, Diaz, like, he manhandled him, but it was still just sort of survival. Okay, I'm just going to win this fight, get the big paycheck, keep doing commercials, and yeah, and Hendricks put the stamp on it to tell him, it's time. You can't do that forever. You can't just go out there to collect a paycheck.
Yeah, you can't, not at this level. And Hendricks is an incredible mixed martial artist, a very big and strong welterweight, incredibly good wrestler, a lot of power in his punches, and constantly improving, very hungry, dangerous opponent, trains at a great camp with Team Takedown, Mark Delagrati and the crew there. I mean, clearly Hendricks, the rematch was Hendricks to win. And so I got to agree with you. Where do you think, though, one last question on the legacy, where do you think GSP rates against Fedor? I'm going to assume Anderson Silva's your number one. Fedor Emelianenko, is he number two, or GSP?
I got them tied, honestly.
Okay.
I think they're pretty much dead even. I think that Fedor, I mean, once again, you get this huge, this huge unbeaten streak, and all the top competition he faced, and this time when he was a dominant heavyweight the dominant fighter in the premier division in MMA, and you can't just like throw that away and say, oh well, it's all equal on paper. It's like, no, people care about heavyweight. You got the heavyweight title, you automatically, that means something more. But GSP has none of he has no Zulu Zinhos on his record. There's no
middleweight Matt Lindland coming up for a fight in the Bodog.
Exactly.
Yeah. So GSP's strength of opposition is probably the strongest in MMA history for any champion like this. I mean, all the way back from his first fight, Ivan Minjavar, back in 2002. This is a guy who's still fighting today and was already a savvy veteran, even though he's dramatically undersized. I mean, the guy fights at bantamweight. But you're looking like starting with his UFC debut against Karo Parisian. Karo didn't fulfill his potential, but at that point in 2004, Karo Parisian was a badass dude, up and comer, dangerous guy, headed for was a staple of the top 10 for years. Jay Heron, somebody else who's still fighting. Matt Hughes, he gave Matt Hughes everything he could handle in 2004 in their first title fight. Then a couple, Dave Strasser, Jason Miller, not such great competition, although Mayhem, more formidable than I think UFC fans today realize. But then Frank Trigg, Sean Shirk, BJ Penn, Matt Hughes. I mean, these guys are all guys who have either fought for UFC titles or held UFC titles. Josh Koscheck, Matt Hughes again. Matt lost to Matt Serra. I skipped that one. Matt Serra becoming the UFC champion. Serra, ironically, the guy who beat him is probably, other than Dan Hardy, the weakest guy on his schedule, going back to Frank Trigg in 2005. I mean, it's an unbelievable rogues gallery of badasses that GSP shut down. And back in the day, he wasn't holding guys like Frank Trigg and Sean Shirk down for decisions. He was destroying them. I mean, when he beat Frank Trigg, people were just like, oh my God, this kid just humiliated Frank Trigg like he was nothing. And same with Sean Shirk. I mean, he was smashing Sean Shirk with vicious elbows to the point where Shirk is gargling blood. And
no, I mean he had that reign where he was, his kickboxing was pretty unparalleled in his division. There were no other strikers who were going to go out and strike with him, and of course that's part of what makes his legacy so great. So I mean that's why I definitely at least put him right there with Fedor. Certainly I have them right as the same in terms of their greatness of contribution and their ability and all that. It's I have no problem with that. He went from one technical mastery all the way over to another, and the only thing he missed was a great run of submissions.
Yeah, he went from that's an excellent point, that he went from a karate-based striking master, knocking fools out left and right, to somebody who became known as possibly still the best wrestler in MMA history as far as effective use of takedowns. Incredible. But so let's get to why is he stepping away? I mean, do you think this is the story that he's just so obsessed with these fights he can't think about anything else? Plus his personal life is chaotic and he's just done. I mean, do you think there's that, or do you think that like Dana White's actions after the Hendricks fight, and then continuing. I mean, do you think there's an element of, you know what, I'm sick of this dude. I'm sick of working for these people. I've had it. Like, how much
I
is
definitely
inside? How much is outside?
I definitely think White didn't help. I mean, I think that the GSP was pretty on the fence about what he was going to do, whether it was step away or stay. And I mean, obviously he was more decided towards getting out of there. But I think that White definitely kind of pushed and said, you got to tell it right now. What are you doing? Are you leaving? Are you leaving? Are you leaving? He's like, okay, fine, I'm leaving. Here's the belt.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, it couldn't have been that genial process or conversation. Otherwise, we wouldn't be hearing about it on a last-minute conference call right before he made a public announcement. This was obviously something where he's been, there's a certain amount of the UFC pushing him and saying, "What are you doing? You got to do it right now. You got to tell us right now. Are you going? Okay, go." And
yeah. I don't honestly know that they pushed it that hard. I mean, and I'm entirely speculating here, but just all we have to go by is the public information. We know that Dana White didn't know this was happening as of 2 days ago. So that tells me and yet everybody in the GSP camp seems to have known this was coming long before the Hendricks fight. So so we've known for a while, there's clearly a gap in communications between GSP and the UFC. Can you see me or?
Yeah, I can see you're lagging just a tiny bit.
Okay, but anyway, so we know there was a gap in communications, and their last known conversation was this weird interaction at the press conference for UFC 168, at which, frankly, Dana White acted like a jackass. He denies that he apologized to GSP, although some of GSP's coaches said he did. Impossible to know the truth of that. But, White basically is screaming and yelling, saying, he was clearly pissed at GSP for talking about taking time off. He was pissed that GSP won the decision in a fight that White said he thought GSP lost. And there just was no respect. He was not treating him like a champion there. He was treating him like just another fighter. And when he was pissed out, it wasn't GSP's fault that he lost the decision. I think it was one of Dana White's pivotal failures. I think it's going to go down with his failure to book Fedor, which I think partly had to do with the fact that Fedor was not impressed with Dana personally. I mean, if you ask Fedor today, he'll say it's because Dana White was an asshole and talked shit about me, and I didn't want to deal with that. And GSP is not the kind of person to say that sort of thing. But he's a sensitive cat. I mean, that's one thing that's very clear about GSP is he's very sensitive, hard on his sleeve, very sincere, affable, nice guy. And to be treated that way, to go through a 5-round war, take all that head trauma, and then have your boss publicly shit on you and say, no, you're not taking time off, and you lost the fight, and this, that, and the other. I mean, I know I would personally. I'm not self-controlled enough. I would have got up and punched him in his fucking bald mouth if I was GSP and he said that to me. I mean, like, what the fuck? I just think that was an appalling. I think it was a big mistake on Dana's part because here's the deal: Johnny Hendricks is not going to have the luster, even though a lot of people, the people who watch the fight, know he won the fight, or most of them do. Not even all of them. A lot of people thought GSP won that fight, but he did not take the belt from GSP. He was not awarded the win. He certainly didn't knock out GSP, and there's always going to be that stigma of, oh, but he couldn't beat GSP, and there's no passing of the torch there.
Well, there is right up until the moment that he knocks out 2 or 3 other people. That's going to be if he can go on a sudden rampage, and if he can turn around. He's fighting Robbie Lawler here, which I'm still not sure that I understand. I mean, I get putting Lawler in because it's a fight that hasn't happened yet, but it still feels a little like, really, Robbie Lawler? That's what if Robbie Lawler is UFC welterweight champion, that's where we're going?
Well, it could be, but here's the thing I don't think you're considering. I think for the hardcore fans that Hendricks' legitimacy won't be that hard to prove. We saw him beat GSP effectively, and if he goes on to win a few more fights. But the deal is, even the pay-per-view against GSP sold a lot less than GSP's last pay-per-view. That was the pay-per-view where we finally said, for the last 2 or 3 pay-per-views, the John Jones pay-per-view at UFC, I can't even remember the numbering scheme now, but the John Jones pay-per-view and then the Cain Velasquez pay-per-view, both of those underperformed. And there were perfectly good reasons why. Or there was a number of reasons people were saying. But when GSP and Hendricks underperformed, like to the tune of 300,000 buys less than what he got against Nick Diaz. Now, part of that was Diaz is a big star, Hendricks is not. But part of that was the marketing vehicle for the UFC on Fox Sports 1 is not what it used to be. They no longer go on Spike and get 2 to 3 million eyeballs a week just on shoulder programming. I mean, they used to have hundreds of thousands of people watching UFC Unleashed, watching UFC Countdown, watching UFC Primetime. Sometimes millions of people would tune in for a UFC Primetime before a big fight. Now they're lucky to get 100,000. And that means that Johnny Hendricks has a much smaller megaphone and is going to be reaching fewer and fewer people. And the people that didn't see that fight and are catching back up are going to be like, now wait, GSP won his last fight and then he retired. Oh, and here's the guy who couldn't quite beat GSP and now he's champion. They're not. I mean, these are the same people that were fooled when Matt Hughes beat Hoist Gracie. Remember that? Like that was people were going, oh, I see this Matt Hughes guy's for real. He beat Hoist Gracie, even though all the fans were like, Hoist Gracie's not Hoist Gracie anymore. But respond, answer.
Well, yeah, but a lot of those. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks to the floor there.
I'm bringing along easy here.
All right, but no, I mean, a lot of those same people aren't even going to remember that Hendricks and GSP fought. I mean, if they weren't tuning in for Hendricks, they're gonna have this vague recollection of GSP fighting a bearded man.
A lot of casual fans will GSP retired. A lot of people that haven't been following the UFC lately. They're paying attention to that, and then they'll be like, "Well, who's the new guy?" And then they'll hear about Hendricks, and then in 6 months they'll hear again, "Well, who's this guy?" And
I think that's why I say I think that's where if he can go on a knockout streak, if he can suddenly be like, first round knockout Robbie Lawler, first round knockout Carlos Condit probably wouldn't happen, but if he could. First round knockout Carlos Condit and first round knockout Jake Shields or something if they decide to throw Shields back up there. But
pretty unlikely, but
unlikely, but he's winning. I mean,
I think it's much more likely Hector Lombard gets to get that first round knockout of Jake Shields.
Yeah, but if he starts stringing that together, which he has the power to do. Absolutely.
He does. He could knock out anybody in the welterweight division, probably most of the people in the middleweight division on the right day, the right punch.
Yeah. Then people are. He's just that's all he needs to blow up. I mean, that's really all any champion needs to blow up, unless you're Jose Aldo and you don't speak a lot of English, and then everybody's like, oh, you want to fight? Well, I didn't even know you were a champion.
I don't know. I gotta disagree here. I think within the bubble he can blow up, but GSP is one of the few UFC fighters that went beyond the bubble. He didn't become a sport-defining superstar, but he was the biggest guy in the sport for a long time at the peak of the sport. But I don't think that has anything to do with Hendricks not being able to beat him. I think it has everything to do with Hendricks not being able to replicate his personality, which, as dry as it was. I mean, you think, oh, GSP personality, yeah, that's great. I got a sheet of paper with a smiley face on it that has essentially about as much personality. But the thing about GSP was, chicks dug GSP. I mean, my girlfriend liked him. Everybody liked GSP. He was handsome. He had the French accent. He fought beautifully. He was a beautiful athlete to watch in the cage, and that was a big factor. And that's something that Hendricks doesn't have and will never have. But also, I don't know, just. If you don't have the head of the old champion on your wall, you're never quite the champion. It's just
but if I'm thinking of, and I hate to even do this because it's been such a long divide now at this point. But if I'm thinking about boxing, like me as a casual boxing fan who will tune in for like a random Pacquiao Mayweather. I used to be a much bigger boxing fan. I used to follow the sport much more closely. But as a casual fan at this point, somebody who tunes in for a few fights a year, I don't care who these guys won or lost to last. I'm just saying, oh, is he a big name?
But Mayweather and Pacquiao, and Mayweather and Pacquiao because Mayweather beat De La Hoya. Pacquiao.
No, I don't know. I don't know Mayweather because Mayweather beat De La Hoya. That's what I'm saying. Is that as a casual fan, you're not like. That doesn't even.
You're just there because this guy's big, and he's big.
This guy's big. Oh, okay, I'll watch him fight. Oh, wow, he did well. Next time he fights, you're still hearing he's big. You go watch him fight. Oh, he did well. So I mean, that's it.
Fair enough.
I just think that Hendricks doesn't have he doesn't have. He could go full heel. He could be like a full heel champ. It's been a while since we've
Ding,
had
ding,
one of
ding.
those.
In college wrestling, Hendricks
Yeah.
was full heel, and he was
Yeah.
hated in arenas across the Midwest and Arizona State. I mean, these places would be packed to try, hopefully, to see Johnny Hendricks lose. They almost never did. And I think this is where the UFC really dropped the ball with Ben Askren, because Ben Askren and Johnny Hendricks are two guys who already have a proven rivalry in the past. And
Yeah.
Ben Askren has all the personality in the world. You may not like his fighting style, but this guy can talk trash. He's arrogant. He's cocky. He's the perfect heel for Johnny Hendricks to beat up. Hendricks could have been the organizational guy. Askren could have been the Nick Diaz guy that's talking smack about Dana White and bucking the system. And I think it was hubris, frankly, of them to try to push him to the WSOF. That they were too clever by half there, and they fucked up. People are saying they didn't, but when you have an undefeated Olympian and you don't sign him, that sends a message rippling out through the MMA world. Jordan Burroughs is watching this. There are guys. Bubba Jenkins is watching this, going, maybe this isn't a great career path. But Jordan Burroughs has already decided to stick with wrestling because they got scared and they started putting more money into the careers of the wrestlers. Wrestling's getting big. Penn State had 16,000 people at a meet this weekend. And college wrestlers are looking and going, I'll probably stick with fuck the UFC. I don't want this. I can have a perfectly good career, with the Olympics and USA, Team USA, and NCAA. Why do I need this grief? I just think it was a huge mistake. But that's kind of aside. Anything else you want to say about Lawler and Hendricks? I mean, so you don't think Lawler is title worthy?
I kind of don't. I mean, I expected him to beat McDonald, actually. I mean, not expected. I picked McDonald because I expected McDonald not to fight as stupidly as he possibly could. But I could see McDonald's growing overconfidence in his striking. He really felt like after he beat up BJ Penn and, he did the little Ollie shuffle thing and all that. And it's sort of like, you think you're much better at this than you are. And, it was the sort of thing like, because I remember I was in the arena, actually, when he fought BJ, and watching him do that, and the crowd immediately turned on him. In 2 seconds, they just started booing him. And it's this whole idea of, like, if you can't knock the guy out, you can't dance in front of him. And McDonald, he's never had the striking to knock anyone out. He's never been a great combination striker. He's got a little power. He throws really technical strikes. But somebody like Lawler, who's a very natural striker, if McDonald wanted to stay on his feet and say, "Oh, okay, I'll jab you from the outside," Lawler can get in around a jab. Yep. He's been around the block enough to know how to do that. So anyway, I just it was a win that Lawler could get.
But he knocked out Josh Koscheck. And beat Bobby Volker. Bobby Volker.
Yes, the Bobby Volker, who I love.
Everybody loves Bobby Volker. But yeah, I mean, it is.
I just don't see why Hendricks Condit isn't the automatic.
Well, what do they have Condit doing next?
Matt Brown just pulled out, so Condit's doing nothing.
Oh, that is remarkable. Condit, Condit is a much better. Maybe they're thinking they'll save that for Hendricks' first title defense. But you're right. That's absolutely weird and inexplicable to have Carlos Condit basically ready to go.
Yeah.
And they must have plans for him in the interim. They want to get him a fight sooner.
I guess. I don't know. It just feels like that is the fight to make. That was a great fight the first time around. It's a fight that a lot of people said, this goes 5 rounds, Hendricks loses it. And it just makes sense. That makes sense. Robbie Lawler, it's more like this is a fight that Hendricks has all the tools to destroy.
I have to agree. Let me pull up the Bloody Elbow meta rankings and see who. Let's look at the top 10 real quick, and see who else is out there. I mean, who else? So there's nobody else up there. Hector Lombard. Hector Lombard's not ready for a UFC title fight by any way, shape, or form. I think he could probably beat Robbie Lawler, but he just hasn't got the resume. Rory McDonald just lost. Jake Ellenberger, Damian Maia. Yeah, nobody really on a hot streak. And then there he is sitting at number 8, Ben Askren, just unsigned, going to waste. Yeah, then you got Martin Kampman, Matt Brown. I mean, the bench is not deep. And
No.
here they are pissing away Ben Askren. I just,
Well, yeah. But let's really not get into Ben Askren.
All right, sorry.
I mean, I'm doing all these like, oh, the UFC signed a new fighter. That's that's a big part of what I do. And every single time it's like, oh yeah, well it's not Ben Askren. It's like, yeah, no kidding, it's not Ben Askren. He's already been signed by ONE FC. It's never gonna be Ben Askren. I don't care.
All right, so after Condit, Lawler probably is the second best choice, but why are we settling for second best in what's already a second best fight? We couldn't beat the champ, so now we've got the 2 second best consolation prizes there fighting for the title. So I don't know. I think this is permanently going to tarnish Johnny Hendricks or Robbie Lawler should he be the next champion. But let's move on. Just a little bit of GSP love. What's our favorite GSP moment?
That is tough. I mean, a big part of me is thinking that those knees to the body against Matt Serra, that's actually the first thing that really sticks out in my mind.
That was pretty sweet. I mean, here's the guy who knocked him out, and GSP wasn't content to just beat him. He destroyed him.
Yeah.
And in a very brutal way with knees to the body on the ground that rarely is a finishing technique, but nobody had any doubt that saw those knees hit that those were finishing blows. I mean, he could have easily killed him or done permanent harm to Matt Serra had that gone on for 2 or 3 rounds. That was just vicious and brutal. That's a pretty good choice. Mine would probably be the first loss to Matt Hughes and then coming back to take the title in the second fight. The Hughes trilogy would probably be my favorite. I mean, that is how you pass the fucking torch right there.
Yeah.
You have the close but not quite fight where GSP shocked everybody by what a tough fight he gave Hughes. And then the second fight, he demolished him. Yeah. And then in the third fight, he beat him again and beat him by submission. I mean, he did everything, showed he was the better man. Had he not dropped his next fight to Matt Serra, it's a totally different history. But that loss to Matt Serra is the defining blot on GSP's record because it changed the direction of his future career. He becomes much more cautious going forward, and never put that under. There's always that. Oh, but he got beat by Matt Serra right at the beginning of his title run.
Yeah,
such an odd fate. But so that's anything else you want to say about GSP's career? Any other fun?
I will say for a great, beautiful moment of Schadenfreude, it's really fun to go back and watch that fight with Jason Miller again. Because he beat the piss out of Miller for 3 rounds.
That he did. But me personally, I mostly feel bad for and about Jason Miller rather than mad at him. But
I would until all of this whole domestic violence thing. That makes it pretty hard for me to really go, alas, poor Jason Miller.
Well, yeah, this is very true. However, it takes 2 to tango, and
I'm not saying
life is complicated and everything, but
but still, I continually find it hard to carry a torch for him.
I definitely am not a fan, and really never was. We're going back to some interview he did with a fan interviewer who was Mormon and just went off on the guy's religion to an extent that even the pathetic Mike Fagan would have known better than to do. But that was just a random cheap shot there I had to throw out. But it really was unpleasant and disturbing and had nothing to do with it. Just like this has nothing to do with GSP. You had a question, what happens with GSP's commercials and sponsorships? Do they just vanish now? No. He's still a valuable property. People still know who he is. People know his name. They like him. If he wants to stay in the public eye and keep doing ads, there will be demand for that. There's and there will be the buzz of, is GSP coming back? When's GSP coming back? How's GSP doing? Like, GSP is somebody who can get on the horn, call his agent, and line up TV talk shows.
The thing I worry about is that because he is so, his whole sort of waxen demeanor was really great for the UFC because it's something that's almost impossible for a fighter to maintain. I mean, we saw how poorly John Jones tried to do that and
Yes.
failed miserably.
Yes.
GSP is really like about the only fighter who's ever been able to carry off being really polite and good and nice all the time, and that being his personality, just being always really professional, always really polite and nice, and just make that work. Maybe Randy Couture too, in
Except
there.
for the 3 divorces and the splits with the UFC and every business partner he
Exactly.
ever had.
All
Other
the
than
all
that,
the all the background stuff that leaked into the foreground with Couture, but always on camera, Couture was always very.
yeah, he's Captain America on camera, and if that's all you knew about him, you'd think he was a wonderful guy. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he'll stay viable. I don't think he's going to be growing those
Yeah. I just think
relationships.
I just think that because he's so, I mean, like I said, because he's so bland, I don't know that anybody's gonna want to like how long are they gonna want to sell him? You
Yeah,
know,
I don't think he's going to be signing any new deals.
yeah.
But however, should he decide he's going to make another title run, say in 18 months, he says, hey, you know what? I've sorted out my issues. He'll have sponsors. I mean, he'll have
Oh yeah.
attention.
There's no question about
So
that.
I
And
think the fact that there's this is he coming back thing will keep him viable for a little long. Now let's talk about that. Do you think he comes back?
that's right now. I'm saying no, just because the way he's stepping out and the reasons that he appears to be stepping out. I mean, it's not just a physical thing. Which if it was, then I might say, yeah, he'll probably be back if he's just like, man, my body's really beat up. I can't keep doing this. I'm gonna take some time off. That'd be like, yeah, okay, he'll probably be back once he heals up. He's gonna be like, oh man, I really want to get back out there. But he just doesn't seem, it doesn't seem like he really enjoys it at this point. And if he's not enjoying it and he doesn't have the title around his waist and his body is beaten up, then I think all that, by the time he wants to come back, he's going to already be like too far physically removed from a point where he could just go into the gym and whip himself into shape.
Quite possibly. I agree with you. I don't see him coming back. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. We certainly haven't seen the hunger. This was a kid who was manifestly hungry for the title in his rise up the UFC ranks, and we really haven't seen that hunger since he destroyed old rival BJ Penn, and since then he's just been sitting on the top and apparently being eaten alive by demons. And one thing I thought was frustrating about the press conference is GSP explained fairly clearly what was going on with him. Like, I obsess too much about these fights, and it eats me alive, and every time I go out there, there's more pressure. I've got more people around me, more, it's a bigger deal every time, more sponsorship deals, more things I could lose, and it's just too much. I can't take it anymore. I can't do it anymore. And then people are asking him questions as if he never said that, or as if that was just to be ignored and dismissed. And I felt that was pretty stupid and disrespectful on the part of my colleagues that were on the call. I was just kind of like, are you hearing the man? He's being hounded by demons of his own making here. This isn't your regular fighter bullshit. There's something more here, and it's happening inside GSP's head.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the problem there was that the rumors got out ahead of him. I mean, and it's unfortunate. It's basically a product of that terrible post-fight press conference that Dana did, where they just kind of shut him down and were like, "Don't talk about it. Don't say anything right now. We don't want you to, we don't want you gone, so don't talk about why you're leaving." And because of that, the rumors got out ahead of him, and so now everybody wants to know is which of the rumors are really true. Yeah, we know you're not feeling it anymore, but that's nice. But who's the baby mama and
Exactly. Who's dying and who's the baby mama and everything else. So, yeah, that's a very good point about Dana shutting him down and cutting him off from questions, which is another point of disrespect we didn't mention. I mean, in addition to insulting him, in addition to saying that he lost the fight, shutting him down and not letting him talk anymore at the press conferences had to be very humiliating for GSP.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this might be, I'm constantly saying this sort of thing, but people might look back at this as an inflection point in UFC history where Dana White finally pissed off the wrong guy. And I don't think we're going to see the like of GSP for quite some time. I don't think we're going to see another million pay-per-view champion for quite a while, for 2 to 3 years at least.
It's definitely, yeah. I mean, it's hard to tell. You never know when somebody's just gonna burst out of nowhere and suddenly become it. And one thing I know that has been a talking point for you for a while is this idea that now the roster's so big that you don't get that mystery of new stars anymore.
Yeah. By the time a guy makes it to the top, he's already lost 2 or 3, 4 fights. If he can make it to the top, I mean, it's just.
But I mean, the weird thing now is that they're with the rate they're suddenly expanding, they're almost getting big to the point that nobody sees you until you're on a pay-per-view main card anymore, and so suddenly even the lower end of the UFC is mystery again.
This is true. This is true, but it's still the lower end of the UFC. It's not the, oh, he was a champion here, he was a champion there. I mean,
yeah, that the ability to build yourself up as one of the world's best fighters somewhere else is basically gone. I mean,
the UFC's ability to market the UFC is greatly diminished. I mean, Fox Sports 1 is not Spike TV. The main Fox is great for pushing 4 fights a year, but they're pretty much pushing these guys as TV attractions. I mean, now that you've seen Demetrius Johnson and Anthony Pettis and Ben Henderson at all fight on free TV, people have not been trained to pay $65 to see these guys or $55 to see these guys. I mean, it might be that the pay-per-view era is effectively over at this point, that what we're going to see is the dying remains, the echoes of the explosions of the pay-per-view era, but we're never going to see a pay-per-view star as big as GSP again.
Yeah, that could be. Unfortunately, that's really where I'm just like, I have no idea. I have no idea when.
You can't predict the future. Your resume said predicts the future.
I know. Well, I gotta build myself up somehow.
Burned again.
I never could have gotten this hot position. It's a really competitive market. You wouldn't have taken me if it wasn't for predicting the future.
You did have to have something to distinguish yourself from the pack. I should have asked you some more questions about using your precognitive powers. But anyway,
your own future.
Well, I don't want to go there. That's dead zone Christopher Walken country. But all right, so I think we've covered everything. Thank you very much, Zane Simon, for filling in on an emergency basis, short notice. Appreciate it. Well done in your debut. I hope the MMA Nation fans like you. We sit in judgment. We wait to hear their response. If you liked Zane, tweet us, comment on YouTube, comment on BloodyElbow.com. Zane, where can people follow you?
They can follow me at DZaneSimon on Twitter, and otherwise find me as Zane Simon on Bloody Elbow.
Awesome.
And occasionally, I'll plug this for Eugene's sake on Aussie.com.
Yes, on Aussie.com with Eugene, and sometimes you do some videos with Matt Kaplowitz, the fight nerd.
Sometimes I do a video with the fight nerds. You can always find the old school MMA review. We got a new one coming out for David versus Goliath tournament, UFC 8.
That was a hot one.
Just watched that again. That was pretty awesome. So check it out. See what we had to say about it. It was pretty great.
Cool.
Until next time.
Remember to subscribe to MMA Nation on YouTube so you get these in your feed. Watch us on. I'm at KidNate on Twitter. Follow us there, and watch us at BloodyElbow.com. Zane, thanks very much, and adios, MMA aficionados.